Yahoo! That was a very official greeting. So welcome everyone. This is a wonderful conglomeration of Wisdom University, Toltec Center of Creative Intent, and Earth Tribe coming together to do this live webcast. And it's very exciting to see people from all over the world joining us. So welcome everyone. I want to introduce my wonderful, wonderful friend, Will Taegel, who is part of both Wisdom University and Earth Tribe. And I was blessed to meet Will after hearing about him for many, many years, since we're both from the same community, at a ceremony that was being done for Jacob's Well, for one of the very sacred sites in our area. And I loved my introduction to Will. This was my official. I'd met him once, but I felt like this was the official introduction. When he walked up and I saw this beautiful man walking towards the group, and my heart just went, oh, look, I know that person. Yay, he's here. And there was just this instant camaraderie. And Will is an incredible mentor, an incredible human being that has been on a spiritual path for many, many, many years and has shared his wisdom with thousands and thousands of people, specifically around community, around reconnecting back with the earth. Will is the co-founder creator of Earth Tribe and also the vice president of community and leadership for Wisdom University. I remembered.
Wow, I'm impressed, yeah. Yeah, well, and I want to introduce to you HeatherAsh Amara, who is really a person who is really a part of the inner circle of planetary teachers. And I've worked with any number of people and working. One job I had was Dean of Faculty, so I had a really good opportunity to know a lot of teachers around the world, and it's my privilege to be with you. And I'm so grateful that the future is in the hands of teachers like you. HeatherAsh is a head minister at the Toltec Center for Creative Intent in Austin, Texas, and author, and most important, one of the pioneers in full spectrum learning. And we're participating in that. And in that way, she's my mentor and our mentor at Wisdom University. It's great to be with you. And in a way, you could say that this 300-foot deep spring that we call Jacob's Well, that really kind of brought us into the same sphere. Yes. You could say in some ways this spring is flowing forth with what we're doing tonight, and is the author of that.
Yes.
The mother of that.
The mother of that.
Yeah.
And what we're here to share tonight is around a new way of being in the world. And it's fun because, of course, it's an old way of being in the world. And that's the wisdom that Wisdom University brings forth, as well as the different organizations that we're part of, is the recognition that it's really, really time for all of us to bring ourselves fully engaged in the world in ways that bring healing, that bring joy, that bring community. And that one of the best places that we can find that wisdom is by going backwards. So tonight is a marriage, we can say, of the modern technology that is so beautiful, that allows us to reach out to people all over the world through the internet and through all those invisible waves and webs that we're connected to. And that what we're sharing is old wisdom. And it's old wisdom that we're working with Toltec tonight, but really what Toltec is the Toltecs were a group of people in southern Mexico that chose to come together to study consciousness and awareness. And the Toltec were like many, many other wisdom traditions from around the world that learned by questing into what was the truth, not so much by thinking about it, but by experiencing it. And the wisdom that the Toltec have, like all the wisdom traditions, is rich with information and sustenance for us today as we go into many times of big upheaval and big change.
Yeah, HeatherAsh and I were talking earlier this evening about the wisdom that has come through the Toltecs, and I was dating myself and going back to Cal Berkeley when I was studying there, and Carlos Castaneda was doing his doctoral work with Michael Harner, and I was introduced to Toltec wisdom in that way. But I've been kind of at the edges. But when I think about Toltecs, I think about one of the first things I learned was lines of energy coming out of the center of the body, the Dantian. Mm-hmm. And I think now, as we're talking with you, that even though we're using technology, we are sending lines of energy to each other, and light is coming to all of us. And we have this sacred web that is holding us together for this period of time that we're going to be considering the whole subject of Toltec wisdom. And one thing that I think of, I know that you and Miguel usually translate Toltec as artist, mm-hmm. but one of the things that I learned early on is that it's sometimes translated as wise person.
Yes.
And that is really kind of what we're about, is seeking the wisdom of our joint endeavor and bringing together what I sometimes call the new ecumenism, where we were here in this little beautiful valley where we live, and so the Earth Tribe was doing its thing, and Wisdom University was doing its thing, and Toltecs were doing their thing, and in some ways we were competing, wouldn't you say? Mm-hmm. And this wonderful experience that HeatherAsh mentioned out at Jacob's Well, somehow when we began to talk after that, we were sensing now is the time for us to come together and to transcend but include our individuality and find a wisdom in that.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. It's so true. And what the Toltec wisdom brings is a dropping away of the old forms that we've learned, and how the Toltec talk about is our domestication, that each of us has been domesticated in different things, and one of the basic domestications we have, and this is mostly Western world, but it's touched everywhere on the globe. Very few people are not in this dream. If you look at media, so if you look at the newspaper or you look at television and you watch the news, what do we see reflected back to us? Is often it's fear, it's scarcity, it's the drama that's happening. And what this shows us is the way that we're dreaming, the way we've been domesticated, is based out of fear and based out of a sense of scarcity. And that's what creates the competition, the judgment, the separation that we are each, I believe the planet and each of us as humans right now is in the process of transforming.
Right, and all you have to do is just watch the weather, for example. And it was a gorgeous day here today, yes. Right? I mean, wonderful. Some of you are from Maui, some of you from different parts of the world, you're having your beautiful days there. But we had a heart expander today. But if we did watch the weather, the dominant culture through a weather person would channel in a message, but in the future, bring your umbrella, some statement like that inducts us into a sense of negative and the negative and fear. And so another thing that I think about in terms of Toltecs is that reaching back. The way I'd like to talk about that is we descend the spiral of evolution to go to these ancient roots, like going down the trunk of the tree into the roots. And when we get to the roots, what we find is the hunter-gatherers. And the Toltecs emerged somewhere around 300-400 BCE. And that's an interesting period of time because the planet itself, planet Earth, was sprouting such incredible sources of wisdom. Here we have Buddha, about this same time, 600, Socrates, and then across the Himalayas, you have the Tao Te Ching beginning, all in the same time at different parts of the planet. And the Toltecs were a transition group between the hunter-gatherers and the agricultural people, and offer us that wonderful sense of how to move from one era to the next. And so later on tonight, when we're talking about this, I think we're going to see how these four agreements can support us in a kind of a bridge, give us the architecture to move from one place to the next.
Beautiful. Yeah, another amazing thing about the Toltec is they were really dedicated to constantly shifting the ways that they would create structures. And so they would create beautiful structures, but every 52 years they would destroy the old structure and then rebuild again. And it was a reminder that nothing's permanent, and that place of connecting to flow rather than this is the way it has to be. So there's a great teaching for us there as well. There are bridges of many, many things.
Yeah. One other little tidbit that I picked up somewhere is that the Toltecs physically were larger people than the Aztecs. And that's one of the ways we know that they were closely associated with the hunter-gatherers. Because when humans made that bridge from being hunter-gatherers to agriculture, it's been our myth in our dominant culture that somehow that was progress.
Right.
But we now know through various studies that when humans moved from being hunter-gatherers to agriculturally oriented people, they became smaller.
Yes.
And the animals became smaller.
Yes.
So that they were not as robust. And so I think in some ways the Aztecs were looked to the Toltecs for the richness of their wisdom to guide them when they wandered off into practices that weren't working for them.
Yeah, yeah. And the wisdom of the Toltecs is something that the Aztecs really believed that the Toltecs were their light, had the wisdom, and it's true, they were really trying to recapture it. And a lot of the Toltec wisdom, what happened is that the Toltecs made a choice when the Spanish invaded, the Toltecs that were still in leadership roles, they made a choice to let go of their teachings in the way of disseminating them in big ways, because they wanted to make sure that the Spanish didn't get the information. And it's a very interesting thing that around these cycles, and many mystery school traditions have had this, where they've disappeared for a while and they've come back up. And it was part of the Toltec prophecies that the teachings would go underground. And in fact, they did. And the Toltecs at the time, they all made a decision that they would only teach one-on-one. They would only take on apprentices one-on-one in order to keep the purity of the teachings. And what happened then is the prophecy was that at some point the Toltec wisdom would come back out because it would be needed by the humans. The humans would need the Toltec wisdom again.
Right.
So the first person to bring that wisdom back was Carlos Castaneda and Don Juan and the teachings of Don Juan. So that's one lineage. The lineage that I'm part of is the Eagle Knight lineage of Don Miguel Ruiz, and he's the author of the Four Agreements. And there's many other actual lineages of Toltec. They think there's 22 different lineages around the world that are all similar. They're all Toltec based, but they all have their own flavor of what the information is. So the information around the Four Agreements that we're going to be talking about tonight is based on Don Miguel's teachings. And Don Miguel I just want to share a little bit about him because of what he has brought through. He was the 13th child of 13 children. So he's the baby boy. And it was always expected he would become a doctor. He had two other brothers that were doctors. And so he studied to become a brain surgeon. And in the middle of his residency, and he didn't believe, like his mother, Sarita, was a huge healer. And he loved her but didn't really believe in it too much. He was going to be a doctor. And at one point he had a car accident where he was driving a VW Beetle and he smashed into a concrete wall head on with four other people in the car. And he remembers leaving the car, pulling the people out before it crashed. And so his whole world was shaken. Suddenly he's like, wait a minute, if I'm not this body, what am I? And that was when he started studying with his mother, with Sarita, and with his grandfather, the old teachings. And at one point he decided, as a brain surgeon, he could help one person at a time. But if he started bringing the Toltec wisdom back through, he could heal thousands of people. So that's what this wisdom is. It's about healing ourselves back to our own authenticity, back to our own freedom, so that we're in choice at every moment. So that we move beyond the domestication of the fear, of the scarcity, and we come back into wholeness.
Right, and the reason I think that this is so crucial is that the crisis that's happening on the planet right now is happening in the loins of the earth. The whole experience in the Gulf with British petroleum is a symbol of that, but the whole crisis is happening in the loins. And that means that we need to connect deeply with these traditions that are connected with what I call the wild heart. They're close to that hunter-gatherer tradition of being connected with the earth in such a way that there was a flow with the earth rather than trying to manipulate the earth.
Right.
And so some of these agreements we can see have the richness that we so desperately need in order to face what Jim Garrison calls whitewater history.
Yeah.
Because we're in the middle of it.
Yes.
Or at least we're at the beginning part of it. And it's so crucial for us to make that connection.
Absolutely.
And to find skills.
Yes.
And that's another thing that I love about your work, and Don Miguel's, is that there are very specific tools to be used. Not just general ideas, but tools that can be used, each one of which can take us through some of this water. Because when you're in the water, you want to swim. You don't know how to swim.
Yes.
You want a canoe that works.
Yeah, exactly. And you want to know which way to paddle. Yeah. And talking to Jim, that's why I was so excited about doing this broadcast and bringing the Toltec wisdom to Wisdom University and combining all of our teachings, is that the truth is we don't really know what's coming. We don't. We have ideas. We see where things are where things potentially could go. But there's mystery. We're in the mystery right now. We're in a big piece of the mystery. And for me, why I'm so passionate to share this work is that I want to help people to be ready for anything. So whatever's coming, and that's the Toltec tools are so practical in that way that they help us to release the past, to completely let go of the places where we're still connected to who we were or how we think we're supposed to be, so that we can come into this present moment so fully that we can be totally fluid and ready for whatever comes our way, and centered, not in fear, but centered in love. And when we come from that place of completely centering ourselves in, look at that big wave, then we are at choice, and we have the creativity. I love it. We are creative in how we respond rather than being habitual.
Yeah. And that's the big thing is, I think we can use the habits that we develop and the habits of nature themselves. I mean, like the field of gravity is really a habit of nature. But we need the habits as a platform out of which can come these quantum leaps. And the four agreements really fit as good, clear habits that we can develop as practices from which we can move through whatever comes.
Yes.
Yeah. Another thing I want to say, especially to wisdom students, because I actually got some emails earlier today, and they were saying things, these agreements seem kind of simple, and could it be that simple? Isn't life a little darker than that, and so on? And I recall a comment that I heard Ken Wilber make one time. When you're going to break out of prison, wouldn't you like to have a good, clear map?
Yes.
So I mean, don't be deceived by the simplicity. In the simplicity is the elegance.
Yeah, so true. And how Miguel came up with these agreements is that he did tremendous work with his grandfather and with his mother around the Toltec wisdom, embodied it for himself, and then he started teaching. And as he taught it, what he saw is the places his apprentices were stuck. the places where they were bumping up against their own domestication and their own old habits and unconscious beliefs. And so in order to shift his students, he came up with what are the simplest ways of new agreements that they can take on. And so that's where he came up with, so they're directly created to help us to break apart the old structure that's no longer needed and take on a new structure. And it doesn't mean that's it, this is the only structure. It just means it's another tool, and they're brilliant tools. So the 4 agreements, briefly, we're going to go through them very briefly, since we don't have more, it could take us days to go through all of them. But first agreement, be impeccable with your word.
Wow, now there's a mouthful.
Yeah.
So, I was just thinking about this word impeccable. It's a very powerful word. Means something like without flaw.
Yes.
And I was thinking about when I was in my early 20s, I was joining a traditional Christian mystical group, and one of the leaders in that group, we took vows, and one of the vows was this: will you go on to perfection? And at the time I thought, oh, I don't like that. I don't like that at all. And then he said to me, where else would you go?
Yes.
So, impeccable means aspiring to being without flaw in the way you use words and the way you express yourself.
Yeah. And the way that Miguel words it is without sin. And he takes the word sin, and we have one definition of sin, but I love his definition of sin, which is this: to never go against oneself. So we're sinning when we're going against ourself, against our authenticity, against our integrity. And to be impeccable means, it doesn't mean that you never make mistakes. It doesn't mean that you become this perfect being, this like angel. You become who you are perfectly, 100%.
Yeah, it has something to do too with the Toltec understanding of artistry.
Yes, exactly.
So that how we express ourselves to the outside world is our creation of art. Our bodies themselves are the word becoming flesh.
Yes.
And so that in a way, how we carry ourselves, the way we are physically in the world, becomes the word as a piece of art. But how we speak and how we are and how the energy comes out of us naturally and flowing through us is in itself an aspiration of the word.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's not just what we're saying. Sometimes people that haven't gone deep with the 4 agreements and read it, what they say is, oh, okay, that means I'm supposed to always speak the truth. Will, I don't like your haircut. See, I'm speaking the truth. It's just the truth. Okay? No, it's an opinion. So this idea of impeccability is about becoming truthful with yourself about what you're saying to yourself, how you're judging yourself, how you're judging other people, to become really honest about what's true for you. And as you said so beautifully, then how you want to share yourself with the world. What's your art? The word is something that we embody. And it's something that we clear away what is keeping us from connection, is how I see it, from this deep connection to spirit, to earth.
Right. And I heard Miguel quote this passage the other day. It's one of my favorites. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, full of grace and truth.
Yeah.
And before the Council of Nicaea in about 300, when they kind of changed things around in the Christian story.
Kind of.
Jesus was seen as God's word being brought forth. not in the sense that that was it.
Right.
This agreement is that we agree to be full of grace, full of truth. Now, the trick is how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so underneath all of this is what I've written about called the journey to our true identity, the journey to true authenticity. Who am I really? And the impeccability comes with my fierce, ruthless determination to be who I am and to see who I am. And then later on we'll see, to do my best to bring that forth.
Yes.
And the bringing forth is the work of art.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And just to make it really practical, because it popped into my head, that's what I love doing is it's easy to think about these concepts, and that's the thing around the 4 agreements or any new code of conduct that you're working to live towards. It's one thing to think about it and to say, oh yeah, that's simple. It's quite another thing to begin to live it completely. And what I've seen is that often people will read a book like the 4 Agreements, and they'll get to, especially when we get to the 2nd agreement, which is don't take anything personally. People love that one because it's like, you can feel, if I didn't take anything personally, my life would be completely different. So what sometimes people do is they'll take an agreement like don't take anything personally, and they'll say, okay, I can do that. I am never, ever going to take anything personally again.
Good luck.
Right, exactly. And then you walk out the front door, and what happens?
Yeah.
Immediately you take something personally.
Yeah.
And what we do next is so important, because the recognition is that you set your intent to never take anything personally again. What most of us do is, of course, we take something personally. Now we're aware that we're taking it personally, and so we go into judgment.
Yeah, but I didn't know you didn't like my hair. Yeah, well, we're moving on to that 2nd agreement?
We can, yes.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think about in terms of not taking things personally, don't take things personally. To state that in a little bit different way for myself, it might be develop a visionary presence, or what the traditions call the witnessing presence. That ability to be on the mountain and to fast or whatever you need to do, to be able to see, as Don Miguel saw in the accident, to step back and at that moment see, over there is a Don Miguel, over there is a Will, over there is a HeatherAsh, and that ability, and that's the practice, that ability to in the moment step back and see that what's going on out here really doesn't have that much to do with me. And I think that's a bit of what
Yes.
is meant there.
Yeah, and recognizing that everyone is in their own dream. They've had their own experiences, their own story of what's happening, and we rarely intersect in our dreams. We're dreaming one dream, someone else is dreaming another dream, and where we get ourselves into conflict internally is when we think that person's dream should be the same as mine, or their dream is the same as mine, and it's just not true. Everyone has different experiences and different points of view. So no matter how personal it seems of someone saying, I don't like you, that's their dream. It has nothing to do with you. And when we get this concept deeply, and how I feel it in my body is a sense of being completely full, of having your own vision and your own knowing and honoring your own dream, which comes back from being impeccable with your word, which means being honest with yourself about what's true for you and what's not. And not just true up here, the depth of your truth and authenticity. And that takes practice. It takes time to learn to become really intimate with ourselves, because most of us have gotten into the habit of defining ourselves by who we think we should be, what others have told us we should be.
Sure.
This idea of something outside of ourselves. And so becoming impeccable and learning not to take things personally, it's a practice. All of these are practices that just like learning to play the piano. Got to get the foundations, the chords down.
Well, and what I like to teach is about the inner council of selves, because no matter what my experience, no matter what I do, I still have those aspects of me sitting in my inner council who are definitely sensitive and are going to take things personally.
Yes.
So not taking things personally means learning how to take care of them. And if I can take care of these parts of me that wonder, well, what do you think about the way I'm talking, or what do you think about the way do you approve of me, or whatever. If I can take care of those parts, then I can stand back, take care of them, and move into an aware decision that comes through the ability to take care of the sensitive, vulnerable selves.
And so when we learn to not take things personally, it's because there may be aspects of us that are going, but there's the big witness self, the core of us that goes, it's okay, I've got you, and is the one that's in relationship to others rather than the scared parts being the ones that are in the main relationship. Because then there's lots of personal taking.
Well, I think the way you express yourself, I was just thinking a book I wrote once called Natural Mystics. I think as you learn to stand back, you become more natural. And you are natural. You are.
It's funny, I watched this with Miguel and with a lot of us around him over the years. I've been studying with him for 20 years now. And what I recognized is that all of us started becoming more and more kid-like. Like we would think that, okay, I'm going to get wise and I'm going to get smart. And just this natural joy is what starts to arise when you stop taking things personally, when you go back into your authenticity. And that when you can really start living from that place of witness, it's then, this is fun.
And I think the notion of agreement is important here. Because we make agreements not to be natural. Or as we've said in psychological circles, you develop family scripts. And the scripts are really unconscious agreements that you make growing up to be a certain way in order to fit into your family or to fit into the culture where you're trained. And so I think liberation, as I mentioned earlier, being liberated from the prison is not earth and going to heaven. The prison is getting out of these old agreements and moving into the agreements that we're talking about that may assist in our becoming the more natural self, the wild heart self, the essence, the soul that is possible within us.
Next agreement, because it fits right in with this, is around not making assumptions.
I'm glad you're keeping count. I can never remember the agreements.
I was like that for years. I was like, there's 4 of them, but where's the 4th one? Not making assumptions. And for me, learning how to not make assumptions is about the willingness to embrace the mystery, to embrace not knowing. And our beings, in order to feel safe, we'd rather make up a story that's wrong and believe it than not know. And so this idea of, Miguel used to always tease us, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? And what part of the domestication is we love being right as humans. Like somehow it gives us a sense of I'm safe, even if the right is completely erroneous.
Right. Well, I think making assumptions really is staying within our smaller stories. And our culture is really right now gripped in just staying with the same sad small story. And our role, I think, is to help the story get larger and larger. And how is that done? I was telling you about an experience I had today where I had a student who's a physician, and she had been traumatized through 20 years of working with people who are acutely ill. And we were walking, and she said, "Well, what is Wisdom University?" And I said, "Well, among other things, we're actively seeking to enlarge the soul." She said, "What on earth is that?" And so at the end of our walk, we came to these two large slabs of limestone, about 2,000 or 3,000 pounds apiece, that we have stacked on top of each other. Mm-hmm. And so I said, "I'd like for you to help you up on top of this rock." And so she got up on the rock, and I said, "Okay, my role here is just to catch you if you fall off the rock." So this is not teaching. This is the rock showing you what the world looks like from about 4 or 5 feet elevated. Mm-hmm. And it was so beautiful to see her face light up just as she looked around this little meadow and taking in what the world looked like. And I think that's, we assume, here's something. I don't know if you just moved in here not too long ago, so you probably know where all the pictures are on your wall.
Getting there.
Yeah. Now, what I have to think and do with some frequency is walk around the house and really look at what I have on the wall, because I get so entrapped in the assumptions about my living space that I stop seeing it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what we do with each other.
Yeah, we really do. We stop seeing each other. And something like in business, I once started talking to people in business. I just took this time where I was really exploring what is it that, because so many people say that they really struggle with communication at business, and there's all this struggle and the gossip and all this stuff. And as I was looking at it one day, I realized, you know what, I bet 95% of the things that go wrong within organizations is because there's an assumption made. At I bet everything could be traced back to an assumption. And it's so often true in our relationships with other people. When there's conflict, it's because we've assumed we know what that person is thinking, or we've assumed they know what we're thinking. And in order to get to shift this, what we want to start doing is asking good questions. And it can be a little scary to say, well, what exactly did you mean? What do you mean by this? But that's the way out, is to keep coming back to, I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking. I don't know what's come before. And to ask good questions.
Right, and we were just talking about that period of time where Socrates and Buddha and the Toltecs arose. For the first time in human consciousness, it became a tool for humans to ask questions.
Yes, yeah.
Up until that time, this was not a prevailing practice. And it's not easy to live into questions. We talk about that at Wisdom University, living into the question. And mostly, I want to live into what I think, because what I think is the truth. I mean, that's the easy way out. That's the easy way out.
Yeah.
So then I assume you need to think like I think.
Right.
And that's where the assumption comes.
Yes, yeah. A game I play with myself is that anytime I catch myself making an assumption, and it can be as simple as someone walks in front of my car that looks like a homeless person, my brain goes, homeless person. It's like, whoa, back up. And I'll make up 3 different stories. So I'll consciously make up stories about who that person is. That person is a professor, and they're dressing up doing a sociological study on how people treat homeless people. That person has a ton of money, but they prefer living outside. That person is actually an alien from another planet. And I just have fun, because what it does is it shatters the place our mind goes, I know what that is.
Yeah.
And you can do that with everything, and it's really fun. And what happens is the mind opens, and you become, again, fluid, creative, and in the present, rather than thinking, I know what's going to happen next.
Right. Yeah. And the I've forgotten the Spanish word that's sometimes used here, mitote.
Mitote, yes.
Yeah. So the myths that we construct for ourselves, the stories that we construct, then we need those stories, but only to hold them very lightly.
Yes.
And the maps that we have, the cosmic maps, I know that it's uncomfortable for people around us. You mentioned about Raven, who's on a retreat and going through a transition. Well, what I experience when I do that, like in the Earth Tribe, sometimes I'll be one place and people who've been around me for years say, well, you're no longer what you used to be. Something's wrong here. And we have to keep reinventing ourselves.
Yes.
And we can't even I use the phrase, take each other for granted.
Yeah.
So because we take each other for granted, then we're making assumptions about who a person is in the moment when they may not be where they were.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And we do the same thing with ourselves. We make the assumptions that who we've been taught to be is who we're always going to be. Yeah. Or we make the assumption that we're never going to be able to shift this part, or it's going to be really hard, or it's going to be really easy. Who knows? So it's that place of coming back into the mystery of just showing up with what's now.
Yeah. One of my primary teachers was a wonderful man's name is Bearhart, and when we would be in a vision encampment, he taught me to go out to the outhouse, which was really just out there, and not go the same way anytime.
Every time, yes.
Find a different way every time. And once we were having a vision quest on a ranch not near here, not too far from here, that had been restored, and there were about 40 of us there. And over the period of a week, we wore a trail into the landscape.
Yes.
And the owner was a little upset with us because we had gotten into the habit and not seen a fresh way to go at any given moment.
Yeah, and that's great because it's exactly the same thing that happens in our brain. And we wear these grooves in our brain and these neural pathways that become habitual so that it looks like we don't have any other choice.
Right.
That we have to follow that groove. And by doing, it's what the Toltec term for it is not doings. So that you're taking actions that in the mind are nonsensical, but they help to break the assumptions apart.
Right.
So a not doing, one of my favorite ones is like taking a pile of rocks and moving them to one side of the yard, and then taking the same pile of rocks and moving it to the other side of the yard, back where they were. And the brain just goes, but it doesn't like it. But what it teaches you to do by not making the assumption that you're gonna get a reward for your actions, you start to come into just being in whatever the action is, rather than always looking at what am I going to get, or assuming that something's going to be a particular way when you get to there. So it's a beautiful, there's not doings, and it also breaks the pathways up in the brain.
Right. As you were talking, I was thinking about a question that came to me from one of the wisdom students today by way of email. It was, well, look, if I don't make assumptions, what do I do with my intuition? Good question, right? Because there's always this paradox. Nothing is ever 100%. So as soon as you say, don't make assumptions, then a person has to think, well, yeah.
But what if?
Well, what if, yeah.
How I phrase that is that if you've ever lived in India or visited India, you know how wonderful people stopping at red lights is and staying in the lines. Because in India, it's just chaos. There's cows and people and nobody's paying attention to anything.
Yeah.
The States is great. There's a red light, people stop. But if you make the assumption that every time there's a red light, everyone's going to stop, not necessarily true. And it's the same thing with the intuition. Yes, you may hold that it may be true, but to always leave the space, and it may not. And that doesn't mean it's always wrong or it's always right, but just to keep the spaciousness around everything is an amazing feeling, because everything does shift.
I love your word spaciousness.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what this agreement is really urging us to do, is create a spaciousness in the way you think about yourself and other people, and most important, about the environment.
Yes.
How is the environment going to be responding in a given moment
Yes.
to us? And what does it have to give to us? And it's in that spontaneity and in that sensitivity that I think our hope lies.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And how we bring all three of these agreements into alignment is by the fourth agreement, which is doing our best. And learning, for me, again, a lot of this is around getting to know ourselves at a really intimate level, of the willingness to delve into who are we truly, and to learn what is our best in every moment, and to know that it's going to change. So our best one day is one thing, and our best the next day, when you're really healthy and you've got a lot of energy and you're enthusiastic, your best is going to be one thing.
Yeah.
But if you're sick and you haven't gotten a lot of sleep and the baby's been up all night, your best might be something completely different. And we have compassion for ourselves that we live at 100% with what 100% is right now.
Yeah, and I like to come back to the inner council of selves, because every one of us has sitting in our council. They may be hidden or they may be up front, but we have a warrior self that is into excellence and into the best, and being able to develop that warrior and call on her or call on him to draw back the bow and take the aim and let the arrow fly in just the precise way, at just the precise moment. There are that group of cells, the warrior cells, that can do that.
Yes.
So a part of the practice is, in my way of thinking, is being able to have an awareness about that. Now there's the slovenly self, the lazy
Yes.
self, whatever, that's over on the other side of the seesaw. And that's good too. But it's very important in this day and time to be able to call on that aspect of ourselves that can do the best in any given moment.
Yes, yeah.
And some moments require more of that than others.
Yeah. But to constantly be cultivating and expanding and stretching ourselves.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is fun.
I know, isn't this fun? We should do this more often. It's great. And we have Dan and Sheila in our little audience.
Yeah, and a whole group of people out there.
It's great. So I want to mention, we're going to open it up for questions in a moment. So if anybody has specific questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and Sheila will let us know what they are. And I want to invite each of you that if you're ready to make some transformations in your life, and you're excited about some of these concepts that we're talking about learning what is authentic, what does it mean to do my best, what would it be like to not make assumptions, imagining not taking things personally, that we're going to be doing a 6-week series that starts February 7th, and it's going to be 6 Monday nights, recorded webinar. And the nice thing is everything's recorded, and so you can access it later to refer back to it. And what's so powerful about working with a group of people on the 4 agreements is that you get to learn more about the tool and then take it into your world and figure out how to apply it. And then you get to come back the next week and go, okay, how did that work? And so it takes it from a concept into action. And these tools are so valuable for people, whether you've done 0 spiritual work and you're just now going, wow, I have control of my destiny, or whether you've been studying every spiritual tradition around the world for the last 50 years, they're still incredibly relevant wherever you are on the spiral of transformation, because they'll work with wherever you're at. And I've seen so many people make huge changes just by taking each agreement and figuring it out. How do I apply it? Where does it need to be applied in my life? So it's a wonderful container, and it's really new containers that we need to become what our potential is.
Right, and we're going to be offering a number of different intensives this spring. And one of the ones we're going to offer will be here in the Texas Hill Country, called Earth Wisdom and the Primordial Mind. And this for those of you who are thinking about taking that intensive, this 6-week course will be a fantastic preparation for that.
Yes.
And undergirding. And you're going to be there.
Yes, and I will be there.
Be there. I'll be there. Judith
Yes,
will be there.
yes.
So maybe Raven will drop in.
He might.
Yeah.
You never know what that boy will do.
Yeah.
Can't assume. Yeah. And
That's
then
why I said maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And we're also going to be taking a journey to Teotihuacan in October during the Day of the Dead. And that's going to be phenomenal over a 6-day period. So Raven, myself, Judith, and Will be traveling down. So that's another wonderful thing. To learn more about these opportunities, you can go to wisdomuniversity.org. And you'll get to see the incredible offerings that Wisdom University has. It's a really phenomenal source of yumminess. That's a very serious scholarly word.
Right. 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 And we have, in the sense of Plato's academy, the Greek word academy goes back to a grove of trees. And so the deepest academics really are fun being in trees and having substance all at the same time.
Yes.
What else could you ask?
Yes. And making what's so beautiful and different about Wisdom University from other universities is that it's about embodying. And that's why I aligned my organization with Wisdom, is because that's what we're so passionate about, is how to make it practical and tangible and to embody it. So that's why the course that we're doing is called Living the Four Agreements. It's about embodying new ways of being.
Yeah, just a word too about the Earth Tribe people. I just want to say thank you for all these years of living many of these agreements and helping them to come really through me and offering the support. And I hope you'll join us in some of these
beautiful
endeavors.
Yeah, beautiful. So here's one of the questions: are assumptions different or similar to judgments? Yes. A lot of times when we make an assumption, we have a judgment attached to it. So often they're very, very connected. And assumptions can also be linked to places we feel victimized. So we're assuming bad things are going to happen. Maybe there's not a judgment around other people around that, but there's this old pattern of I'm always going to be trampled on.
Right, and one way I might expand this a bit is to say be aware of assumptions.
Yes.
And
because we're going to make them.
We're going to make them. And what is the role of assumptions? Is to protect us.
Yes.
And so if we don't use assumptions to protect our inner vulnerabilities, what do we do? And that's the good news. I think don't make assumptions then pushes us ways to nourish ourselves and take care of ourselves without using these prejudices and judgments as much.
As much, yes. Yeah, and learning to witness what's arising for us. So not assuming, and this is the biggest part about not making assumptions, is that we're learning not to make assumptions about that are what we're thinking is true or not true.
Right.
We're learning to not take our own minds personally.
Right. I have no idea about what the next question is.
I know.
It's wonderful.
It's wonderful. How do you stay honest to ourselves and others? You guys are good with the questions. Practice. We've practiced for years not being honest with ourselves, not being honest with others. And so when you first start, or when you continue learning to be more honest, recognize it may not feel good. This is sometimes, I think, where I've noticed with people is that we get caught in this idea of, if I'm making the right changes, I'm going to feel better immediately. And sometimes it's not true. If you've really believed for your life, your whole life, that people are only going to like you if you go along with what they say, and one day you start to realize, you know what, I don't like Italian food. And everyone says, we're going to go to Italian food. And your old agreement says, don't tell them the truth because they won't like you. But you're starting to get more honest with yourself. You might practice going, I'd like to go to Mexican. And that might be a terrifying thing to do. it might feel really uncomfortable in your body because what you're used to is not telling yourself the truth, not telling other people the truth. Yeah, Italian's okay. But suddenly it's like, actually, no, I don't like Italian. And so sometimes making those changes is uncomfortable. So learning to stay honest with ourselves is about practicing listening to ourselves about, in this moment, what's true for me, and telling ourselves the truth. And knowing you may not get it that time, but you keep practicing.
Right, and this is occurring to me that we might do in one of our intensives. If we really knew each other well, and if we really kind of trusted and felt safe, we might get a small circle, maybe not a large circle, but a small circle where we could have an exercise of great lies I tell myself.
That would be beautiful. Yes, yes. Many great lies.
Yeah, because if you can embrace the lies, then you can let go of them.
Yes.
So if you're pushing off
Yes.
of them, so to be honest means I can't lie to myself, then the lies will get pushed underneath.
Right. Yeah, and that's so true. It's to be honest that you're judging, to be honest that you're still in fear, to be honest that you're telling lies to yourself. That's a great start. Okay, Will's hairdo approval rating, 94%.
95.
I love it.
Oh, you know what? I think the person that cuts my hair is watching.
That's
Really? I
great.
think that's true.
Excellent. So
That's true.
she has strong voting power. And here's something, to not take the positive personally as well as the negative.
Well, yeah. Is that a question someone's asking?
No, that's just something that
Something that popped
right,
into your...
it popped in my head. Because we think, oh, well, I'm not going to take anything negative personally. In order for that to remain solid in your being, it means you also get to practice not taking the positive. You're the best personally as well.
Right. But how can I let the love that everybody here might feel in a given moment for me if I'm not taking it personally?
Because, ooh, I love this. I love this.
I'm going to stump the expert.
No, this is great. I love this. I love this question because it's such a good one. On the path of healing, most of us have not learned to receive love.
Yeah.
We haven't been able to take it in. And so that's, for me, that's the first place of learning to really receive, learning to really go, yes, and eat that nourishment of just authentic love that other people have for us and be able to receive it. And at some point, we need to be able to internalize that completely so that we don't need it from the outside. So it's great to have it from the outside, but we're not going, I'm okay because Sheila likes me. I'm okay because Will's approving of me. But at first, the only way you're going to get full enough is to learn to receive until you can find that source, that wellspring inside of yourself. And then you recognize none of it's personal. And isn't it yummy that's my word tonight, yummy. Isn't it good to share that love?
Yeah.
To just share that love. How do you bring wisdom of the trees and rocks to this perspective?
How do you do what?
Constantly bring the wisdom of the trees and the rocks to this perspective.
Yeah.
There's wisdom in everything, and so the Toltecs really did their best to not make assumptions about anything, and that included assumptions that there's not wisdom in trees or there is wisdom in trees. It's like to treat everything as sacred, to treat everything as a source of knowledge, to treat everything as a teacher. And so in that opening, then we are available for wisdom and teaching from everywhere.
Right, and one of the central assumptions and agreements of our dominant culture is that trees and rocks are objects to be studied and to be classified and so on and so forth. But when we descend the spiral to the era, the shamanic era out of which the Toltecs came, then we begin to see that every aspect of the universe is alive and a potential transmitter of meaning and love.
Yes.
and that at the heart of everything is this transmission of love and meaning. So if we can take that assumption, at least work with it as a hypothesis to experiment with taking in, then I think that makes us less dependent on humans.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you say it comes from within, of course, some of it comes from within, but a way I might put that is that this whole universe is teeming with love and challenge and questions and nourishment.
Mm-hmm.
And the central tenet of the shamanic era is to open and make porous the membrane between humans and non-humans.
Yeah.
And when we can do that, then we're not beset with all of this dependency that we have on getting approval
Yes.
and getting this,
Yes.
getting that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
And then it makes us available to be loved and to love.
Yes. And to have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting time. It's time. So thank you to Dan and Sheila for your support. I know there's more questions, so for those of you that still have questions, feel free to email. I'm going to give you the Toltec Center address, so tolteccenter@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to answer. Even better, though, join the 6-week course, because that will give us the opportunity to go into a lot more depth. This obviously was a drive-by of each of these agreements, and we'll go much, much deeper into how to embody them, how to bring them into your world. So if you're interested in continuing, Sheila, can you post that link? So Sheila's going to post a link that you can go directly. The 6-week course is only $25, so very, very inexpensive, and we always strive to make things available to as many people as possible.
So I'll drop in from time to time as a color commentator.
Yes.
You're the expert. I'll offer observations and
Beautiful.
color comments.
Yes, so will be our yay! And you can see what a wonderful commentator he is. It'll bring a lot of richness. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining me today and
Yeah.
for this wonderful, cyclone isn't the right word, what's the vortex of transformation that's happening with all these different organizations.
And thank all of you for joining us, and look forward to more interaction, more questions, more life together, and leaning into the questions.
Yes. Yeah, and we're just getting started. It'll be fun to see what comes next through the Wisdom University portal.
Yeah, I'll throw out this. Somewhere along the line, I'm going to talk about the lost agreement.
Stay tuned for the lost agreement. And I'll talk about the 5th agreement somewhere in the 4 agreements.
Oh, good.
Ooh. Blessings to each of you. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.